كل الكذابين حماس، لأتحداكم لو انتم مسكتوا 5 زي ما بتحكوا ومسكتوا سلاح، أتحداكم لو طلعوهم على الإعلام انتم كذابين وما ضل الكذب تبعكم وما في منه كمان كلامكم. حماس انتهت وللأبد ولا التاريخ.
فيش أخضر، فيش أخضر من اليوم، فيش أخضر.
حماس انتهت ولا التاريخ. ما فيش حماس. حماس حتصير رماد. حماس كانت رماد، نار وحتصير رماد. ما فيش حماس.
فيش أخضر.
واتحداكم وانا وانتم، وانا عارف وين انتم وين موجودين. بتحداكم كلكم.
That short clip that went somewhat viral in the last few days shows a powerful clan leader in Khan Yunis. That's in the southern part of the Gaza Strip. And he's burning a Hamas flag. He's not hiding his face. And he's taunting Hamas, saying, "You're destroyed. It's over." Well, you can read the English subtitles to get the message. It's pretty clear. Hamas, however, is not destroyed. It is still standing, and it is still armed. It holds power in the central part of the Gaza Strip, and with each passing day that Hamas is not disarmed and has not been forced to relinquish power, two kind of provisions that are set out very clearly in President Trump's peace plan, with every passing day, the reality on the ground becomes more violent, chaotic, and dangerous. This is Hamas we're dealing with. There have been many videos circulating recently, and they show Hamas terrorists executing and beating Gazans in the streets of the area that they control. I'll spare you those images, but Hamas puts them out for a good reason. And the tight grip that they continue to hold in the central part of the Strip is nowhere near over. So, Ya'akov Katz, our regular commentator, analyst, guest on the State of Tel Aviv and Beyond podcast, is back from a 2-week tour in the States promoting his book and meeting with groups and discussing. And he joined us yesterday to discuss what's going on in the Gaza Strip, the chaos, how it might be controlled, when, and by whom. During our discussion, we make reference to the yellow line. And you can see now on the screen, there is a map, graphic map, and you see a yellow line clearly. From that line to the border with Israel, that whole area is controlled by the IDF. The rest of that map, so inside the yellow line and to the sea, that's controlled by Hamas. I'm Vivian Berkovich, former Canadian ambassador to Israel. Let's do this. Welcome back to Israel. Ya'akov Katz, Monday, November 3rd, just before 2 o'clock in Israel. Thanks for joining State of Tel Aviv.
It's great to be here, and it's great to be back in the country.
Back in the saddle. How long were you away for this time?
Just 2 weeks, but a bit hectic. Every day a different event, different place, different group, different book talk, but good.
Sounds successful, sounds busy. This is what comes with celebrity, Ya'akov. Book is great. Your book is great. I will recommend it again today, and I always promote it in the podcast notes, but it is exceptional. And as you know, I've been quoting from it in many of the things I've been writing. Some just incredible stuff in there. But I'm so glad you're back because I really wanted to touch base with you and get into what is and is not going on in the Gaza Strip, in particular, under the sort of, quote, terms, loose as they are, of the Trump peace plan. It's no longer a proposal, right? And of course, we are still kind of, I don't know about you, I'm still kind of in shock that all 20 living hostages still held by Hamas were released on October 13th, within hours of one another. So here we are today, almost a month later, 3 weeks after this deal was signed, and we're kind of in limbo. We are still receiving the remains of murdered Israelis and other nationals, as Trump would say, in dribs and drabs. And we are sitting kind of with a vacuum. Nobody is actually going into the Gaza Strip to disarm and disperse Hamas. Israel still continues to control more than 50% of the Strip. In this vacuum where Hamas controls a significant chunk of the land, there are some bad things going on. So why don't you just give us a quick debrief on why we seem to be in this kind of no man's land in terms of progress of the peace proposal?
Well, I think you accurately described and depicted the situation, right? We're already close to a month into the ceasefire ever since Donald Trump made his visit to Jerusalem and then went to Sharm and basically signed this document that with the 20 points of this plan and declared that he had achieved peace after a 3,000-year conflict here in the Middle East. Well, peace has yet to be found and has yet to be achieved. And also, this never was a 3,000-year conflict, but put that aside for a moment. I think we're definitely in a very precarious situation because while Israel has withdrawn to what's known as the yellow line on the perimeter pretty much of Gaza, and it varies at different stages along the border, but for the most part, Israel's along this yellow line. Hamas is in complete control of other parts of Gaza, has reasserted itself on the streets, is walking and roaming the streets of Gaza with its masks, with its green headbands, with its weapons at times. And we saw just the other day, I mean, even Marco Rubio posted this on X or tweeted this out, was this video that the US CENTCOM picked up with the drone of Hamas looting a truck of humanitarian aid coming into Gaza. And then again, everyone says, well, this is why we have to get rid of Hamas. But we're not getting rid of Hamas. I mean, the fact is that now, almost a month into this, you have a reality that there's two Gazas. There's the Gaza, which is under the control of Israel within the yellow line. And there you even still have fighting. I mean, it's not quiet there, right? There's fighting. There's still Hamas pockets of resistance. There's now some reports that Hamas is asking for safe passage out of that area where it is, where the IDF is in control, so it can go potentially into the other part of Gaza. Why would Israel allow them safe passage? If these are bad guys, they should be eliminated, right? That's always been part of the war. So what are you going to do? You're going to let them leave the area under your control so they can go into the area that you don't control and then regroup and recoup and present even a bigger threat? But this vacuum is not filled by anyone except for Hamas, right? So basically, the war ends, get back our hostages, which was, I think you and I probably agree, the most important piece of that, of how it ended. And we're waiting, now there's, as of recording this, there's 8 bodies that still remain in Gaza. But who has replaced Hamas as the governing entity? No one. Who's replaced Hamas as the police force in Gaza? No one. Who has disarmed Hamas, taken away their weapons, destroyed their tunnels? No one. Where is the International Stabilization Force, the ISF, that's supposed to have commitments from places like Indonesia, the Emirates, the Egyptians, the Jordanians, the Saudis, the Pakistanis, and others? Well, that's not coming anytime soon, it looks like. So what's happening? And I think that it was always going to be difficult to move from phase 1 to phase 2. But what we are seeing happen is that phase 2 is not only is it not coming so fast, but with every day that passes and as Hamas regains more strength, more power, more control, it's going to be more difficult. Because I'll just leave you with this one question. What country in their right mind is going to send forces to Gaza where they might get into battles with Hamas? Their troops might be killed. That's not going to be popular, whether it's Jakarta, Amman, Cairo, Abu Dhabi, or London that's sending them. And number 2 is those forces and those countries that send them are going to be accused of one quick thing from the get-go. You are a proxy of the state of Israel, and you are now the occupier of Gaza on behalf of the state of Israel. So it's not going to be popular. It's going to be dangerous. Why would anyone in their right mind do this? Hamas is still there. So I think we have a real big problem here.
We do. And I want to just focus on a few of those nuggets that you threw out Of course, when Vice President Vance was in Israel last week, I believe, I actually passed him, on Highway 6 as his convoy of huge convoy was going north. But he made the point, look, every time something kind of, goes a little wrong or sideways, the media and many other kind of interests and stakeholders are jumping on this and saying, this is going to fail. There's no way. And he said, this is really tough. We have two forsworn enemies, arguably more, who are, kind of in this position of trying to very slowly move towards a radically different kind of arrangement, a peaceful arrangement. And he said it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of time. And there will be setbacks and then we'll move forward. But overall, he said at the time, I think we're in a far better place than I would have thought we'd be after 1 or 2 weeks. And it's his job to show commitment and express optimism. But that was now already like a week or 2 ago since he was here. And there has been no movement, not even any movement that I can see or know of with respect to managing, disarming Hamas. And as you point out, it's going to be very difficult for any Arab or Muslim majority country to send troops in. So let's focus on 3 things. One is the challenge, a clear challenge in disarming of Hamas and having them, relinquish or surrender power, which they're clearly stated they're not doing. The conflict and fighting between Hamas and armed clans and gangs in the area they control, and the apparent murder of civilians, individuals in the Hamas-controlled area who dare to disagree.
So I think that you have a situation where the Americans, of course, want to portray optimism and success. And this is partially because the president has said this war is over, peace has come, and he wants this to be a defining moment in his foreign policy achievements. And therefore, also, what you're also saying is that when Israel is attacked by Hamas, and when we even have casualties, like last week where the reservist was killed, or the week before when 2 soldiers, an officer and a soldier, were killed in Rafah, Israel's ability to respond was, I would say, hindered, but restrained because it has to coordinate everything nowadays with the Americans. And this isn't just the Joint Coordination Center that's been put together in Kiryat Gat, which is jointly staffed by Americans, by Israelis, and representatives from other countries as well, and is kind of going to be the command post for the mechanism that oversees anything security related with the Gaza Strip. But that's like kind of the overarching umbrella here, is that the president doesn't want this spiraling and getting out of control. And therefore, everybody is kind of towing this line. But with that said, you have some serious disagreements from what I hear. For example, the yellow line. So within the yellow line, we know that's where Israel is. And we know that outside of it, about 50% is where Hamas is. Now, there is some idea that within the yellow line territory where Israel's located, that's where they want to build these residential areas, and they want to move hundreds of thousands of Palestinians to live there. This will take some time, but they can start the rehabilitation, the reconstruction there. Now, then you go to the ISF. How long do you want Israel to be there? Now, the Americans, definitely the Arab countries, want Israel out of Gaza as soon as possible. And we've heard the Jordanian foreign minister speak in Bahrain the other day and say, and again, Jordan is supposed to be one of the countries that's going to be helping with this whole process here. And the Jordanian foreign minister comes out and says that as long as Israel's in Gaza, nothing can happen. We need Israel to completely withdraw. But Israel's never going to completely withdraw under the current situation where you have Hamas in control. So we're kind of in this catch-22 situation. But even if we look at this, the ISF, there's also some misunderstandings. Where does it deploy? Does it deploy along the yellow line and police the area where Israel is, and then eventually allow Israel to withdraw? So it knows that it's handing over at least the area where it's in control to this international stabilization force. Or, as Israel would like to see, it wants the ISF inside the parts where Hamas is in Gaza. But that goes back to what we discussed before. Who is in the right mind that's going to go up against Hamas? Because what Hamas is doing, and this ties into the second part of your question, Hamas in the meantime, over the last few weeks, has not only been putting its people out in the streets, to show the civilians of Gaza, here, we're back, we're in control, we survived, we're still here, but also to fight back against some of the militias, definitely those in the south of Gaza, like the Abu Shabab militia, which was armed by Israel and supported by Israel because they were a force that was, yes, criminal and had some jihadist roots, but was seen as a counterweight to Hamas. So they're now cracking down on them. They're cracking down on anyone who they suspect as a collaborator or an informant or someone who has cooperated with Israel. They're executing people on the streets of Gaza. They're beating up people. They're rounding up any dissident and stifling any such sort of opposition. This is Hamas back to itself, Vivian. This is what they were before. This is what they are now. And I think we're left with the question, one second, where is the total victory that we were promised by our prime minister that is just around the corner, that we're just a few steps away from achieving? This was already over a year ago where he made that promise. So I don't see it around the corner. I don't see it here. What the government will have you believe if you talk to them is that the war's not over. I mean, we have a pause. We're waiting to see what happens. But if we need, we're going to go back in. But then I look at the two recent instances of where we're ambushed. Our soldiers are killed. And, we do something symbolic, but this is not the end of Hamas as we had been promised by the government.
No, it's nowhere near the end of Hamas. And I mean, another sort of random detail, but kind of important random detail. You'll recall I think it was November 24, when we were told, 80 or 90% of the tunnels have been destroyed. You and I spoke about this at the time. And just last week, our Minister of Defense, Ya'akov Katz, came out and said 40% of the tunnels have been destroyed. I mean, that's one heck of a discrepancy. And that number in the interim has kind of, gone up and down like a thermometer. So,
But I want to just add one thing to the tunnel thing that you're mentioning, because it's just super important. One of the 20 points of the Trump plan is disarmament of Hamas. What does disarmament mean? Is it just collecting AK-47 Kalashnikovs? Is it taking away their RPGs? Their rocket arsenal has pretty much been eliminated already. But here's the bigger question. The tunnels you just mentioned. If we, the Israelis, have only destroyed, let's be generous for a moment, say 50% of the tunnels. So that means you have about 200 miles of tunnels left inside Gaza. We know what they're able to do with these tunnels. We know what they've done with these tunnels. Who's going to destroy them? Do we really think? And here, I think what people don't understand is what it takes to destroy a tunnel. People think you find a shaft, you blow it up, you destroy the tunnel. No, not at all. For every kilometer of a tunnel, you need to use tons of explosives. So imagine a 4-kilometer tunnel. We're talking about an exorbitant amount of money, an unbelievable amount of explosives. It's very complicated. It takes huge resources, manpower, time. Who do we think is going to do that? No, seriously, who? So I don't see, I don't want to be pessimistic or skeptical, but I just want to be realistic here. We're leaving a situation, or we have a situation on our hands right now, where Hamas is, weakened, degraded, a shadow of its former self, defeated militarily, all true. But they never needed to defeat us militarily to win. They needed to survive to win. They needed to be able to hold on to Gaza to win. And they needed to keep Israel ostracized and isolated to win. And all of that they have achieved.
we're taking a brief pause here for station identification. I've gone easy lately on subscription solicitation, but would really appreciate it if you would consider supporting our work with a paid subscription. It's easy. Just go to our website, stateoftelaviv.com, and you'll be prompted along. Start with the subscribe button. We're dedicated, on the ground, and totally independent. We rely on you, our listeners, our readers, for support. So if you are able to support us, please consider doing so today. Thanks, and now back to Ya'akov. So, the way that this deal has been kind of articulated, expressed, is in, as you referred to it, the 20-point plan. Started as 21, now we're, a few days later, it was 20 points. And, we know from Trump, from his book, The Art of the Deal, from his behavior, his conduct. And we also know because Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner have very openly commented on this. And they've said, the way we approach this kind of challenge is to get the parties around the table to agree to the kind of broad, high-level principle. Okay? So what would be the broad, high-level principle in this case? Cessation of hostilities. Stop the fighting. Stop the war. And then the kind of points become the details. And one of the major points, I think that this was the first and the deal breaker for Israel and America, return of all of the living hostages immediately, right? Okay, so that happened, and that was just a kind of mini miracle, I think. And then the bodies, the remains of those who have been murdered, still important, and in spite of what everyone says, less critical than the repatriation of those who are alive. Okay? Important, but if it's a day or two later, not as critical. But then we get to, as you say, the disarmament, the disarming, having Hamas relinquish weapons and power. Hamas never agreed to that explicitly. They come out now with very contradictory statements all of the time. Their chief propagandist, who really ensured strict discipline on messaging, was taken out by Israel a month or so ago, Abu Ubaidah. And it's a very a lot of mixed messaging coming out of Hamas these days. But the overarching message is no way we're giving up power and no way we're giving up our arms. And this seems to be, of course, the impasse. And it's quite an impasse because it's difficult to see how we move forward in the agreement without tackling that very early challenge. I know that General Dan Kane from America, was just here a couple days ago, and I'm sure that's one of the things that he was discussing. Can enlighten us at all as to what may be going on and what may be discussed? Because this is an impasse that if it's not broken means that we're going to have to go back in. And again, like you, I don't want to be, pessimistic or doomy and gloomy, but it's reality.
Well, I think that Israel has a number of issues, obviously, it needs to coordinate with the Americans. But number one, and first and foremost, when it comes to Gaza, is when is that moment coming that we will decide together? Because this will have to be a joint decision, especially now when you have American boots on the ground, not inside Gaza, but directly outside of Gaza, and they're watching over everything that's happening there. So when do we reach that point that we say, listen, guys, we've tried, it's not working. Israel does have to go back in because there's no one else who's going to do it. And I think that's something we have to recognize. The other thing we also have to recognize, and this is just opening up parentheses for a moment, is that having a multinational force on the ground inside Gaza is not necessarily the best thing for Israel. It has an upside, but it has a downside. The upside is, for the first time, these countries, including many from the Arab world, are taking responsibility for Gaza and for the Palestinians. That's the upside. The downside is that once you have this ISF force on the ground, and then Israel does want to go back in and does want to take on Hamas, suddenly you're going to have thousands of these other foreign troops. The last thing Israel, God forbid, would want to see happen is accidentally kill a Pakistani or an Emirati or an Indonesian or Egyptian soldier inside Gaza. So it's not a very simple reality. And anyone who thinks, oh, you get this international, multinational force and everything's going to be hunky-dory, well, very far from it. So there's a lot of coordination on the different scenarios. And what do you do? I think Israel is being very smart, by the way, and also politically, if you think about it for a moment. You don't have the political saber rattling that we got used to over the last 2 years, where Ben Gvir and Smotrich every day are threatening to topple the government if Bibi doesn't resume the war and if Bibi doesn't go in there and kick Hamas's ass. That's not happening this time. And I think they understand that better to be seen as playing ball for Donald Trump, and that we're not the side that is violating the situation, so that if things do get escalating and we do need to go back in, we will have the legitimacy and the support of the Americans. So you see that this is the reality on the one hand, but Gaza is only one piece of the puzzle for what Israel needs to coordinate with America. Let's not forget, we have a serious situation in the north, in particularly in Lebanon. Syria's up in the air in a question of what's going to happen there, but less of a direct threat at the moment. But Hezbollah's, as we were just told the other day by Tom Barrack, who's the U.S. ambassador to Turkey and is the special envoy of the Trump administration to Lebanon vis-a-vis Israel and Syria vis-a-vis Israel, that they're rearming, they're getting their hands on more sophisticated rockets and missiles. They are still a threat. We heard the Prime Minister Netanyahu talk about this just the other day at the cabinet meeting. And there's the Houthis, which is a whole other issue. But more importantly, you got Iran. And for the time being, Iran is, still hurt and damaged with its nuclear facilities, but we're already hearing and seeing these reports of them working with the Chinese to rebuild their ballistic missiles and their air defenses and much more. Israel has a lot on its plate at the moment. I mean, like I said before when we started, there's no peace. We're far from peace. I wish we weren't. I wish we could celebrate the peace here, but that's not the reality.
Yeah. And so I just want to close out with a question that you probably can't answer, but I know you'll come up with something good, which is after 2 years of this horrible war for everyone, and you and I have both been in Gaza and seen that it is pretty much just an open park of rubble. There are some buildings that are somewhat inhabitable in the Gaza City area where Israel did the least bombing, but it's really Gaza's been destroyed for all intents and purposes, and its infrastructure has been destroyed. There's still 2.1 million people, more or less, in the strip located there. And what I just really struggle to understand are a few things. One is day to day, do we have any sense as to how they're living? And also, how do those 2.1 million people feel about Hamas? Do they want Hamas to remain in control and in power? Are they so cowed and terrified after 2 years of what they've lived through that they won't oppose, rise up, speak out? I appreciate that you're exhausted and worn out, but it's a very difficult situation to understand. Can you shed any light on that?
Look, I can tell you, I mean, they're not living in a good situation. That's obvious, right? Gaza has been devastated. There's a tragedy that has fallen over Gaza. I would argue that it's the fault of Hamas, but it is the result of 2 years of a real devastating war that has seen too many people killed in Gaza and too much destruction to Gaza. With that said, the reconstruction that everyone thought was going to be almost immediate in the aftermath of the war is not happening yet, right? And this is a result of the fact that no country is willing to really start to send money there without knowing where it's going. What is the mechanism in place to oversee how it's spent, where it goes, the cement? I mean, think for a moment, Vivian, just about cement. You buy cement, you ship it to Gaza. Who's going to make sure that the cement is used to build buildings, cultural centers, schools, mosques, whatever, for the people, and not used to build underground for Hamas? Who's going to do that? So you need is it the UN? Is it UNRWA? No, I don't think it's UNRWA. Who's going to take care of this? And that mechanism is not yet there. And therefore everything else is stalling at the moment. So any aid that you thought was going to be rushed to the Palestinians, I mean, there's much more humanitarian aid, there's more food, there's more supplies that's coming in, and that's definitely an upside. But people getting back their homes, it's not coming that quick. So that's one. On the other hand, when you look at public opinion, listen, there was a poll that came out recently that spoke about how there still is a majority of Palestinians who support Hamas. There's a majority of that they want to see Palestinians, even if there was a race between Mahmoud Abbas and Khalid Mashal, who's one of the last remaining leaders of Hamas based in Doha, Abbas would lose tremendously. I think only like 10, 13%. The rest would vote for Khalid Mashal. Most Palestinians want him to step down. This was a poll that was done by the Palestinian Center for Policy and Survey Research. I mean, so this was a Palestinian poll, not an Israeli poll. And you see that the support on the street and just general public opinion, Hamas is still very popular. And you know what? Maybe the way to explain it, I don't know necessarily, but it could be that the way to explain it is they fought off Israel, right? They got stuff done. They got 2,000 Palestinian prisoners released, 250 serving life sentences. They fought for 2 years against the most powerful military in the Middle East, and somehow they're still there and they still survived. And for a people who really don't have much of a horizon and much hope, this is what you got. And it's tragic and it's sad and it's terrible. And by the way, this is why another one of the points of the Donald Trump 20-point plan is so crucial and critical. That's called the de-radicalization. But to start to think about de-radicalization, I mean, which is this is the other thing I think about sometimes. What does de-radicalization mean? It means changing all the schools, all the imams in the mosques. They have to be replaced or they have to suddenly talk differently. Imagine changing all the rabbis and all the synagogues. I mean, like, this, you have to change newspapers, cultural institutions. I mean, so much has to undergo a change. It's not a quick win here. This is a huge, long, tough journey that will take a long time. But if we want real potential, then we're going to have to do the hard work. Otherwise, we'll be back where we were.
Yeah, I think the closest analogy we have historically, which is far from perfect, but it's close, is the Marshall Plan and the kind of denazification process that was undertaken in West Germany after World War II. But I mean, that was with a clearly vanquished enemy. The Axis was defeated, Germany was defeated, they surrendered totally. And so the Allies went in and were able to take control and begin to implement all the various aspects that we're looking at in Gaza: clearing rubble, rebuilding, de-radicalization, denazification, whatever word you want to attach to it. In some parts of the world, they call it re-education, but we'll stay away from that.
Which, by the way, this shows Netanyahu was not wrong when he insisted all throughout the war that decisive victory is critical for success. The problem is, we have to admit, we do not have a decisive victory here.
Yeah, I think the other problem was, and he's a smart man, Benjamin Netanyahu, and he knows better, to commit to achieving decisive, total victory in this context might have been just a touch reckless, because it was never going to be achieved, in my view. But what it did do was allow him to rag the puck and keep moving the goalposts or the net so that, we had to keep going because we were so close, we're so close, we're so close. And then the curtain came down.
Basically, there is still a tremendous amount of work, a tremendous amount of pitfalls, and a strong likelihood that in some way this war resumes in the near future.
So I think that we're going to end on an optimistic note, which I realize may go down like a bit of a bitter pill to many of our listeners in America. But I would suggest that good news is that we are only at the end of year one of the Trump presidency, which means we have 3 more years, which means that a lot of tough work can still be done, because the toughest stuff is usually done in the first couple of years of a mandate. And then it's all focused on getting reelected or having your successor reelected. So if there is tough action to be taken, let's hope that the United States continues to stand with Israel. And in closing, I have to say that you asked the question, it's a really good question. Who's prepared to step up and finance and the rebuilding of the Gaza Strip, and who's prepared to say, yeah, we trust that they're going to use this cement for buildings? Prime Minister Mark Carney of Canada. He's the man. All right. It's good to end on a light note. Having said that, it's actually kind of half serious. Thank you, Ya'akov, as always. We'll be coming back to you
Always
soon.
great to be with you, Viv.
And welcome home.
Thank you again.
As always, thanks to our listeners for being here. I won't go as far as saying that life is calm here these days, but it is calmer. I feel that we're really able to catch our breath somewhat, but the crises never stop. In addition to what's going on in Gaza and not, things have heated up a little on the northern front, the West Bank. But in the last few days, there's been a major, I'm not sure what to call it, a scandal, a thing involving the top military lawyer in the IDF, General Ifat Tomer Yerushalmi, At the moment, she is in police custody and under investigation for a series of allegations that are beyond serious and disturbing, as serious as it gets. She resigned from her position a few days ago after she is reported to have admitted that she leaked video evidence that allegedly shows IDF troops abusing prisoners at the Sde Taman prison facility, which is where Hamas terrorists and others from Gaza have been kept. And this case is as serious as it gets. It reaches into the highest echelons of the military, judicial, and possibly political worlds in Israel. And when I say it reaches in, I'm not saying they're implicated. I'm just saying that they've all kind of touched on aspects of this case at some point. Tomorrow, I will be speaking with a former military lawyer, IDF lawyer, who is now a leading attorney in Israel in private practice, and he will help us to unpack the allegations and explain the impact of this case, not just on the IDF, but on the integrity of Israel's judicial system and how it's perceived, both civilian and military. All that protects so many Israelis from aggressive, determined, and well-financed harassment and possibly prosecution in Europe and elsewhere is the integrity of our judicial system and legal oversight in the IDF. So I'm going to have that podcast out for you for the weekend. In the meantime, thanks for being here. We love hearing from you, so please comment on our website, stateoftelaviv.com, or send us a note to hello@stateoftelaviv.com. On behalf of the State of Tel Aviv core team, Yon Zabo, our creative, graphic, visual, and marketing man, Amir White, producer and editor extraordinaire, sound guy, who is also impressively patient with me and my boomer tech deficiencies, and our social media manager who pitches in on everything, Maya Naftalin. Thanks to the team. Thanks to you for being here. We'll be back soon.